On today's video, we have a returning guest, Rolf Dane, who is a longtime Scientologist and who still practices Scientology away from the Church of Scientology. Anyway, he's come back and we are going to talk about some Scientology history on the Royal Scotman, which later became the flagship Apollo. Rolf was there with Janis on the famous Liability Cruise where Mary Sue Hubbard was the captain of the ship shortly after they got the Royal Scotman. So we've got photographs and stories from both Rolf and Janis. We hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. Aloha, Janis. Aloha, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. And we got a good show here for you, don't we, Janis? Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, we do. And good day, everyone, and welcome to Scientology Peeling the Onion. Yeah, we do have a good show today. We're going to talk about, we're going back to 1968 on the Scientology history. And we're going back to the early days of the Royal Scotman. It was purchased as the Royal Scotsman, and it was supposed to be re-registered that, but they left the S out, so it was Royal Scotman. But anyway, I arrived on the Royal Scotman in January of '68, and our guest today arrived a month after me in February, and he's actually a returning guest. We had him about a month or so ago. And he's still a practicing Scientologist. He's written a book. He's not part of the official Church of Scientology, but he still believes in those practices and continues them and audits people. Anyway, so he arrived on the ship in February 1968 onto the Royal Scotman. So let's welcome Rolf Dane.
Hello, Rolf. How you doing?
Hello, Mark. Hello, Janis.
Hi, Rolf.
Great to be back with you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had some good response on your earlier show, and so we're happy to have you back and get some more response.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love your show. I've been watching most of there's so many, so I cannot guarantee I've watched them all, but I'll attest someday here very soon.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate loyal and dedicated viewers like yourself.
Sure.
And you're in Denmark, right?
I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark. That's right.
Yeah. And
that's my home country. And I lived in the U.S. for about 20 years, not as a Sea Org member. I was in the Sea Org for a couple of years. But then I chance of luck, I went to Indianapolis and lived there for quite a while.
Okay. So now you're back home because you're Danish, right?
I'm Danish, absolutely.
Right.
Besides Danish, I'm a sailor at heart. So I was very fond of the Royal Scotman.
Yeah, so let's get into talking about the Royal Scotman. This is her in those days. That's what she looked like before she got painted white and rechristened as the Apollo. But I arrived there in January '68, and you arrived just after me. But when you arrived, you said the ship was already in a condition of liability. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. As far as I know, they had messed up some orders, as the harbor master had given some orders, and they couldn't comply because they didn't know really how to handle the ship at the time. And it was all office workers and bookkeepers and what have you, and were put on board that ship, so it didn't go so well.
Yeah, and that's totally correct. Leon Steinberg was the ship's master, but he he didn't know how to run the ship, so he was kind of like the captain in port, and they wanted us to move to another dock, and no one knew how to move it, and then and then we end up at an anchor, and Hubbard by this time has sailed back into Valencia, and we're out at anchor, and a storm comes up and pushes us into the rocks, and Hubbard's on the Avon River at the time, yelling and screaming from the dock, from the ship, from the deck of the Avon. And remember my mother standing beside him and handing him the bullhorn as he's yelling and screaming across the water to the ship dragging the anchor. And then he finally got a dinghy off and zoomed over and got in through the cattle doors and went up to the bridge to get us off the rocks.
Whoa.
And that's when he was like, okay, this ship is in liability. Nobody knows what they're doing. They need sea training.
Wow.
And so we were to be sent off to sea to learn how to run the ship.
Right.
As I've said many times before, it's amazing how nobody got killed in those early days of the Sea Org on the ship, you know?
You bet.
Yeah, I think the worst injury we had was John Bragan on the poop deck during docking in Valencia, where he was handling ship lines with the tugboat and the dock, and it pulled on it, and he lost 2 fingers with a wire cable pulling it against the bullet. So that's the worst I seem to remember.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see any accidents at all at the time.
Now, Rolf, you had sailing experience prior to coming to the Royal Scotman?
Yes, indeed. Mainly in small boats and so on. But as we are a seafaring nation, so it's kind of it runs in the blood.
It's in your blood.
Yeah.
The Viking blood.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Yeah. All right. So when you came aboard, you were saying, well, Mary Sue was the captain at the time, but she had been down, I guess, at the Avon River in Valencia, and you drove back to the Royal Scotman with her?
Yeah, I arrived with 2 Danish friends, and we met Hubbard on board the Avon River and greeted him and all. And then we were told that we had to go up north to this port, Porto Segundo. And we got a ride with Mary Sue, who was going up there to take over command, I believe. And yeah. So we just had a nice ride with her. Yes, I mean, it was kind of a shock. I hadn't been in Scientology for 2 months or something, and suddenly you were sitting with the top. And I remember she said something. I've heard all this about OTs, and then she said she couldn't find her glasses, and so something like that, something silly, and that doesn't make sense, you know. She has to know exactly where the glasses are.
Oh, I see.
Right. Yeah, well, that's Mary Sue when she was captain. She was, we were in one of the Spanish ports, and she was actually on the dock with Otto Roos, looking at the side of the ship. Otto, I think, was the bosun at the time.
Yeah.
And that's who you drove to the ship with.
Exactly, yeah.
And then Janis, can you I know we covered it in earlier videos, but why was the ship put in a condition of liability?
Well, because nobody knew what they were doing, and no one was really trained or anything. The people who knew what they were doing were pretty much the officers and the crew on the Avon River, because they were with Hubbard. They'd been training, you know, and he was sailing different places with them. My mother included. She was there because when I showed up on the Royal Scotman, she was off. She'd left the day before on a mission into time to go, you know, explore and dig around the Greek islands and Italian islands to confirm Hubbard's What he did is he'd go in session to do some whole track recall, and then he would come out and do a clay demo of what he thought was the layout of the land and where there'd be treasures that he had buried. And then the crew would go in the little dinghy ashore in the dead of night and with a metal detector and try and find these treasures. And some people said, they never found anything. Well, I have a friend who was on those, and she still has a couple of coins that she found during one of those digs. So, and also when they do debriefs, they would have put all that kind of stuff in their debriefs, but it wasn't any big loads or anything like that. But, she got a couple of coins from it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just so people know, Janis, the white boat there, that's the Avon River, and then the big one behind it is the Royal Scotman, correct?
That's right. And yes, this was in Valencia at that time period that we're talking about.
So you can see the difference in size. Yeah, it's quite a big difference in size, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The Avon River, when they sailed from England down to Las Palmas, they hit a storm off the Bay of Biscay of France, and it was described as a cork bobbing in the water. It was like just being knocked everywhere in that storm. And it was an old fishing boat. Blake Huffam had described it of having to scrape fish scales off the deck when they first were renovating it up in York, England. No, in Hull.
Right.
In Hull.
Hull.
Yeah.
England, yeah, I met Blake Huffman later on. He was in Copenhagen for a while.
That's right. And
also about the mission into time. A friend of mine, probably a better friend of yours, but Bo Waters, he was in Copenhagen also, and he had been on that mission.
Yes, Bo was on it, and Bo actually tells a story of being on the Avon River. Well, actually, he didn't tell me the story, but Amos Jessup told me the story. And Amos was up on deck dropping the anchor and didn't know that Bo had been chain locked. And Bo in the chain locker as the chain is running out.
Wow.
And he said he was just hanging on to the edge of the hole where the chain goes in the locker.
Yeah.
And afterwards, Bo went to Amos and said, how he nearly killed him by lowering that chain. But Amos had no idea that Bo was even in there. But that's how dangerous stuff got, and the ignorance and, and the danger of putting someone in a chain locker.
Right. But it's not the small forces we are messing with. It's really, anchors and so on there. It's heavy stuff,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then Janis, so Mary Sue did she volunteer to be the captain for the Liability Cruise, or was she ordered to do it? How did that come about?
Well, the information I've gotten from people who are on the Avon River, Hubbard was so upset with Mary Sue, the fact that she was on the ship and didn't take control and do something about the situation with the public relations with the harbor master. So she apparently was over at the Avon River when he sailed in. And, he hadn't just sailed in, he'd been there a few days, but she was over there to see him. And from what I heard from a couple of different people who overheard it, he was blasting her for having done nothing. And she actually got down on her knees, and he was going to send her and the children back to St. Hill and not be part of the Sea Project or the Sea Organization. And she apparently got down on her knees and begged not to be sent back to St. Hill, claiming that she could handle it, she would do it, let her and the children stay, and that she would even be captain and get the ship through the condition. So that's how she ended up as captain. She asked for it herself. But so she was made the captain. She didn't know a lot of what to do, but she had Bill Robertson and a couple of other people for good support to help her get through it. We have we have a picture of Captain Bill.
Right here.
Yeah, there's Captain Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know him well. He was CEO for Europe later on,
Yeah.
and our commanding officer. And of course, he is also known for the Runtalk network and all that.
Yeah, apparently he'd called that Sector 9 or something like that. And that's now turned into Ronsorg, which is a independent free zone group.
Yeah.
Headed out of Switzerland, I believe, and they've got branches up in Moscow, and they've got him in South Africa, because I went and visited the Ronsorg in South Africa when I was there last year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I know they're also connected with the Israeli mission, Danny and his group. So, and he apparently came up with, well, Scientology has up to OT8, but Captain Bill is said to have using telepathy.
Telepathically.
He had telepathically communicated with Hubbard and got all the OT levels from 9 to 48. 48.
Yeah.
Okay. But I've read that story, and I know that Captain Bill was not physically around Hubbard at the time he put those OT levels together. But, these people, they're making gains off it, or so they say, and they're enjoying it, and they believe it's from Ron. So who am I to say otherwise, So be it.
Right. Yeah, I'm not into it myself, but I have many friends that are.
Yeah. And they seem to have wins with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So what happened when you got to the ship? I mean, you arrived with Mary Sue, and it was.
We arrived 3 Danes, and we got installed in just in a dormitory or whatever. But I mean, I didn't care so much. I've heard some people they were upset about it was in first class. But I mean, I'd just done my military service, my necessary, obligatory service and so on. So I was quite used to, the life in a camp and on board a ship.
Tight conditions and all that.
Tight conditions and all that. So it didn't bother me that much. And I was just excited to be on board such a big ship and, be part of the game, so to speak. And I was kind of, I was posted as a swamper first, and then I did my my AB check sheet, and the bosun that was, as you said, it was Otto Roos, the Dutchman there, and we got along very well. I think he was busted since he was a high-tech person for real, and now he was just going around there sweeping the decks and so on, and so was I. But we went along very well, and he promoted me to deputy bosun, which was very kind of wonderful.
Can I ask a question? Because I never had to do it. What was on the AB check sheet is the able-bodied seaman check sheet. What type of training would you learn, like ship's terms and how to tie knots, or what did they do?
It's a long time ago, and I've done so much sea training, so it kind of blurs out. But what I stood out was the knots and so on, because I could teach those to people that were sitting there with a rope. And how do you do a clow hitch or a bow tie and all these things? I'm not sure of the English terms, but anyways, that was very popular. I could show you do like this,
Yeah, I can bring up some more on the able-bodied checklist. You learned the weather, you learned clouds, you learned the barometer, you got to steer the ship, so you learned the compass, and you learned how to be a lookout, and all those basic things of how a ship runs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, I found this picture right here of Otto Roos.
Yeah.
He was the bosun when you were there, and this was later on, but he was a class 6, I believe, at the time. And then he became a class 8 and a class 12. He was one of the original class 12s until he got in trouble and accused Hubbard of having rock slams. What had happened was Hubbard had gotten really sick, and Otto had offered to do a folder error summary of his PC folders. And in there, they found RS written down. And so Otto made a comment that LRH had RSs in his folder, and they needed to address that. And when Hubbard found that out, he was furious because he doesn't have evil purposes. So why is Otto accusing him of such? And I had message runs to Otto about this, and all the class 12s had gotten together and they were doing the folder error summaries. So Hubbard thought that they must have been talking about him and joking, or, about these RSs. So Otto actually went up to Hubbard's office, where Hubbard took a swing at him. And Mary Sue was there saying, Hubbard's never RS'd. I've been his auditor for a long time. He never RS'd. RS being rock slammed. So anyway, it turned into this whole big thing, and Otto ended up being offloaded and declared.
Wow.
And wasn't Mary Sue the one who wrote down the RSs?
Yeah, but the thing with the RSs in earlier materials, like in around 1960 or 61, you were looking for the rock slam channel. You got to find rock slams, you see. That's in the red volumes and all. And so I'm sure that you saw a dirty needle and said, wow, we better call that a rock slam.
Right, and that was part of the message run, too, was to explain that a rock slam in those days was different to what a rock slam were in the newer days.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. You're looking for them, not that, ooh, this is horrible kind of thing. So it's totally a different attitude towards it.
Right.
But anyways, I worked with Otto, and obviously he had been busted and all that, but he was a very kind of civilized gentleman, and we liked each other. And I had a communication with him many years later, because I was part of a little Free Zone magazine. So we contacted him. I think he was in Holland at the time, in the Netherlands. But he had been spending years in New Zealand, making a fortune on printing and advertising and stuff like that. As far as
he had a travel agency as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was very old at the time when I got in contact with him. He was very secretive, You had to go through his secretary, but that was also him, you see.
Right. Well, Otto came to the U.S., I think it was 2000, and we did a whole bunch of us old timers did a reunion down at Huntington Beach, and he came over, and then a few years later he came to Vegas. And he was trying to get me to find his ex-wife, Robin Roos, because he had no heirs. He was going to leave everything to Robin. But in trying to hunt her down, I found out that after Hurricane Andrew wiped out her house in Florida, she rejoined the Sea Org. And so that he couldn't get a hold of her.
Wow.
But yeah, and then over the years I would hear from him. He'd send me a Christmas card, and I haven't heard from him for at least 10 years, so I figured he must have passed on.
Yeah, I couldn't say, but you saw him after I had contact with him, and that was just emails and so on. So that's a long time ago. But anyways, getting back to the ship there, we were sailing quite a lot to get, as you say, getting into ship shape and getting the crew trained and all that, and that was a lot of fun. And Mary Sue, she was a captain, assisted by Captain Robinson, and I think Wally Burgess, he was on board at least, and also a
Yep.
experienced sailor, I believe. And then
Yep.
we have this Baron Perez, I think. Is that correct?
Yep. Baron Perez on the right and James Byrne on the left.
James Byrne, yes, I remember
James
him as well.
James Byrne apparently is still in the Sea Org.
Yeah, I was in the in the blue big building in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he had some. That was in the 90s actually. So that's still 30 years ago or something or more. But anyway, he had some honorary posts where he didn't do much, and but he kind of was. He was posted there and happy to be there.
Yeah, he was my grades auditor at St. Hill back in '66.
Oh, really?
He'd just come over from Rhodesia. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
now called Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, about auditing, I got my first auditing on board the flagship, but that was a Joburg security check, you see. Because the ship was in liability, so everybody had to, get a good sec check. And that was my very first auditing. And I remember it was a very good-looking girl, Fran Deutsch or something. I think was the name. But anyways, we went through this very fast, no work clearing, and then we came to the question, do you have any record? And that's kind of criminal record, right? But to my best of understanding, my English wasn't that good, so I thought it was a gramophone record, you see.
Like a music record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The old-fashioned ones that was in style back then, right? So, and later on in a break, I came out, and then Arthur Hubbard, he came up to me and he said, "You're going fast, you're going through the whole list so fast." I said, "What?" How does he know that what's going on in the auditing room? It has to be confidential.
Was he case supervising, Janis?
No, he was just a kid at the time, and he was sitting.
Oh! You're talking about the kid. I thought you were talking about LRH.
Quentin. No, about Quentin Hubbard.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the. I think it was the older one of the on board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, he was getting a sec check in the room next to mine, you see. So I'd been listening in, and that's why he had heard.
Well, these auditing rooms was in the aft well deck area, in the tween decks level, so it was below deck. But they'd thrown up just pieces of board to make these rooms, and then they didn't go all the way to the overhead. So
and there was no soundproofing. Yeah.
No soundproofing, so you could hear a whole conversation in a regular voice, So that's how Quentin was hearing everything Rolf was saying.
Oh.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And but we got it sorted out, so that was not a big problem.
Yeah. I, by the way, also got my first Joburg sec check at the same time you did.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and Amos Jessup was my sec checker, and yeah, I didn't understand half of what was being asked.
Well, what were you 12 years old? Janis?
I was 11 years old. So any of the sexual questions, I had no clue what was being said. And then I was asked if I had ever smuggled anything, and it kept reading on smuggled. And I said, well, when I came through Valencia, my brother's air rifle was in my suitcase and it was locked. And so when we went through customs, they tried to open and look in my suitcase. And then when they saw it was, this little 11-year-old, they waved me through. So I was like, I guess you could say I smuggled an air rifle. And And what's funny is years later, you're talking 22 years later, when I was maybe 20 years later, when I was being kicked out of the Sea Org. This is back in 1982 or something, when I was being declared and kicked out. The port captain's office pulled me in to sign a declaration of all my crimes. And the only thing they had was that I smuggled guns into Spain. I mean, that's how it got changed. It was an air rifle, that I'd been shooting since, I was 6 or something like that, but it was my brother's. Uh-huh. And there I was now being charged with smuggling guns into Spain. So
see, Scientology never forgets what they find out about you. And I was going to ask, did they include that in your suppressive person declare? But obviously they have that information.
No, it's not in my SP declare, but
I know, I'm joking,
and I'm like, I'm not signing this. But you have to. You're being routed out. And I'm like, I'm not signing this. I did not smuggle guns. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, Rolf. Go back to your story.
Yeah. Where did we get to?
Were you a deckhand? Is that what you were doing during the
liability? Yeah, I was a deckhand, and I had duties also on the bridge, which was very exciting.
What did you have to do on the bridge?
Well, I remember one incident. I was a lookout and up on the flying bridge, on the roof of the bridge there. And Mary Sue, she was at the bridge as well. And it was a very dramatic situation because we were hoisting the anchor and they couldn't start the engine. So they were kind of telegraphing like mad there. And they ring, 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 back and forth. And the poor guys down in the engine room, they I don't know, they couldn't get it going. And we were kind of drifting towards the coast and all that. But then finally, there was somebody who said, prop watch. They always had a lookout at the back there to watch the propeller if it was running. And that would create some prop wash, as they call it, some interpolation in the water there. Mm-hmm. And then we got it going there just before we kind of hit the rocks and so on.
Yeah, just so everyone understands, when Rolf's talking about the telegraphs, that is right there in that picture in front of Captain Bill. And that is how, when we were docking or anything we were doing with the ship, that is how the bridge communicated with the engine room. And you'd ring it back and forth like this to get their attention. Then you put it into slow ahead or medium ahead or full speed ahead, or you pull it back into reverse. And that's how they communicate. And down in the engine room, they would see this same thing going back, moving. And then they would change the motors, the engines that led to the propellers, and to comply with what's being asked.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this ringing sound is very loud and characteristic. When you're maneuvering in a harbor or something, you hear this ring all the time.
Yeah.
A little forward, a little backwards, and so on.
Yeah, there was no radio communication or telephone or anything like that to the engine room, but there was, you can't see it there, but in the bridge, you had a metal pipe that went down to the engine room, and you'd lean over it like this, and you would talk into the pipe, and the sound would go down, and they would have their ear to the pipe to hear what's being said.
Yeah, exactly. That was the old system there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was
then we finally put on what?
Yeah, it was a very nice brass pipe, and it's very polished up and so on. It's good old craftsmanship, but it's very primitive all the same.
Hey, Janis and Rolf, when you were docking, I mean, I watch current shows of, below deck yachts, these mega yachts, and they're docking, and they have the deckhands on the side with fenders, and then the captain's maneuvering the boat and talking to them back and forth with a walkie-talkie. How would you dock a big ship like the Royal Scotman? How would you communicate with the people on the sides of the boat in the back and everything? Do you know what I mean?
Well, you didn't. No, no. From the bridge to the forward part and the aft part, there was a telephone system. Mm-hmm. And so that was used because I was the forward talker. So I was up on the bow with the speaker and the mic, and I would communicate to Hubbard up on the bridge, and then the same for aft. And then so it would come to me, and then I would tell the forward in charge what the instructions were, in addition to him being able to hear it directly through the radio. And I remember. Go on.
Yeah, there was somebody on the aft deck, the poop deck, I think it was called, looking for the prop wash, as to see if the propeller was running. And there was just loud yelling, prop wash, as loud as you can. And they could hear it up on the bridge, I suppose.
How would they tell you to throw the lines? How would you just automatically do it, or would somebody give the command, or what?
Well, the forward in charge, or the poop deck in charge, which is aft, they would be the ones who would be watching and say when to throw the lines and so forth. And there's a great story from when I was the forward talker, and John Axel, who was an old-time Scientologist, and he's still apparently in. He was one of the linesmen in the forward part on the bow, and we were docking in Melilla, Spain, Spanish Morocco, Melilla. Mm. And he threw the monkey line. The monkey line has a fist on it, and you attach the rope to the ship line, and you throw the monkey line over, and the guys on the dock catch it and pull the ship line over and put it on the bullet. Well, what happened is John Axel threw it over, but had forgotten to tie it to the ship's line. And it bounced off the dock into the water. And suddenly, John Axel dives over the side of the ship. Hubbard's on the bridge going crazy. What the hell just happened? And I'm on the walkie-talkie saying, not the walkie-talkie, but the radio saying, John Axel just dived over the ship for his monkey line. And I'm looking over the side, and Axel comes up holding it, so proud of himself for having gotten it. And he has to climb up onto the dock on these big truck tires they call camels. And so he has to climb up onto the dock that way. And then they had to, of course, quickly tie another monkey line to a line and get it off so we could dock. But a year later, I'm on watch with the Commodore, and we go down and we greet the pilot who comes aboard, who's going to now take us into Melilla. And we're walking down the promenade deck, and the pilot pulls out some glasses from his pocket and says to the Commodore, "Do you remember when your crew member drove over the side of the ship?" And I had to remind Hubbard that it was John Axel. And he remembered it, but he didn't remember who it was. I said, it was John Axel. And it was John Axel's glasses. He dove in with these glasses on. And when they did a cleanup of the dock and redid all the camels, they found his glasses down there at the bottom of the dock in the water. Wow. And they kept them. The pilot knew that we would be back one day. And so he came out with glasses.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Again, it's amazing nobody was killed in dealing with the Royal Scotman and the Apollo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, Rolf, have you got any stories like that, and difficulties in maneuvering the ship or anything?
No, not really. That was this year when it was lookout.
Were you involved? Were you involved when the lifeboat, Janis, with the whole lifeboat thing when you guys got stuck ashore in Spain?
No, not that particular one you referred to, where you had to stay overnight at the beach or something. No, we went ashore with Dusty Rhodes. He was a coxswain. met him as he was in Copenhagen later, so we became good friends there. And
Yeah, we have
he
a
was,
picture of Dusty here.
yeah,
There he is.
exactly, yeah. And he became a Nuts auditor in Copenhagen and did that for years and years. As long as I followed it, I can say I don't know what he's up to now, or he's probably an old man.
Yeah, well, Dusty married Anne Tampion.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Rhodes. And they were on the ship together. And Dusty, you'd think he would have been there for the rest of his life, but Anne ended up with TB, tuberculosis.
Oh dear.
And so they were sent to Denmark to get treatment. And then once it was treated and it was healed, they both returned to the flag at the land base at that time. And that's how he ended up as the Knots auditor there, where I believe he's still there. But he's got to be in his late 70s by now.
Yeah, but both Anne and him were there. So Dusty and Anne, they were both in Copenhagen, kind of, very kind of respected tech terminals and running AO business and so on.
You know, it's funny how these names are easily remembered because I never forget Dusty Rhodes and another tech terminal in issues, Rocky Stump. Remember? Rocky Stump and Dusty Rhodes. They were both like mentioned in some kind of bulletins or whatever. And I go like, those are the funny names. You know, you'll never forget.
Yeah.
Those.
It must be in a Western song or something.
Like a cowboy Western song.
Yeah. Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, and they were both highly trained. Yeah, they were both highly trained tech terminals. I remember Rocky, he was sent out to Asher, I believe it was, and he was the case supervisor there for a long time. Yeah, someone actually mentioned to me maybe about 2-3 weeks ago that they saw Rocky and were in touch with him. So he's still around.
Mm-hmm. In Australia, you said? Yeah. All right. Yeah, but I mean, I was inspired by my short stay in Spain there and on board the Royal Scotman. It was kind of a haphazard thing because our franchise holder had told us we could go down there for the summer, and I had a backpack, and I was a real kind of backpacking adventurer, just like, college student and so on. And then they kept asking me, have you signed the contract? Have you signed the 1 billion years? And I said, oh, what 1 billion years? I have to be home here by noon, And but I enjoyed it very much. And so I went back to Copenhagen after, it was about 6 weeks or 2 months or something, because I had obligations and so on. But later on, I joined the Athena when it came to Copenhagen, and that's where Stella was our captain first. And later it was. Yeah, you had a picture of her there.
Yeah, and she's there in the white shirt.
Stella who? Do you know?
Stella King. When I first joined the Sea Org, Stella was the purser of the Avon River, and eventually she became the captain, and she sailed the Avon River. Later it was changed name to the Athena, and she sailed it up to Denmark and remained as the captain up there for a while. And that's where you worked under her when the Avon was... I go between Avon and Athena because it depends on the time period. So sorry if you're having trouble tracking with me.
It's the same.
It's the same ship.
It's just a different name.
Same ship. Yeah. I'm just looking for a picture. I'm just looking for a picture of it.
The other way.
Yeah, it was next to the big.
Yeah, but there's a one by itself too.
Yeah, it's
yeah, you had an area, kind of.
Yeah, there's one of her. That's the aft.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was her in Copenhagen. So yeah, Stella took her up there. So it was the training ship for all the EU organizations and the
Sea Org
Sea Org.
members.
Yeah,
Right.
up there.
Yeah, he was there for a long time, and I was the second mate on it, which was responsible for training, sea training, and tech training, and everything. And that was a lot of fun. So I
Did
had.
you take it out? Did you guys take it out, or did it just stay dock?
No, we did take it up out for several longer trips to Sweden, which was one long trip to Gothenburg, where we did a kind of public relations and so on to the org. The same to Stockholm. And actually, at the time that there was an ED coming out from Ron, that he kind of foresaw this here with free winds, because he mocked up that we would have a cruiser sailing between the Scandinavian ports, right? And this was way back in 72 or something like that. And this kind of stayed at the idea, kind of stayed on there, and it became actually the spark to the Free Winds project, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
How about
the Athena, Mark. Yes, yeah, she did all the sailing Rolf was talking about until eventually she was in the harbor and actually got hit by another ship.
Yeah.
And that brought her days to an end, and she was then replaced by the Kesselholm.
Yes.
And we can do a whole nother story on that.
Yeah.
But so the Athena then was sold off as scrap or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah, it was total, as you could say, out of business.
I was going to ask, was one of the things that would hold up, you guys going out on cruises on the Athena, would it be how much money you had for fuel and that type of thing? Based
yes,
on the money that was coming in.
They were tight, and I heard a lot about that. And on the rumor line that we didn't sail much because the fuel was expensive and all that. And but it was running on steam. The good old ship there had a very special triple expansion steam engine. That first you have the high pressure steam, then when the pressure goes a little off it goes to the next cylinder. It's a little bigger, and then there's a third cylinder that's even bigger yet. And in that way, you use all the energy that's in the steam there. But yeah, of course, we needed fuel to get the whole thing fired up, and it took several hours, I think, before we were ready to go to sea, because we had to get all this boiler water up to boiling temperature, so we have steam coming off it. So.
Right. My brother, when he was 15, I believe he was the chief engineer on the Athena, on the Avon
really?
River. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Hannah was the captain, and she came down the engine room on an inspection and saw some grease on the floor and brought up, "What's this grease doing on the floor?" And my brother flippantly is like, "This is an engine room." Anyway, he ended up in the chain locker at 15 years old.
Oh dear.
That's Hannah Eltringham right
there. That's Hannah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw you made an interview with her here recently, right?
No, we have not interviewed Hannah yet. She's been working on her book and doing some other stuff. But as soon as she's freed up from that, she's promised she'll come on our show.
Okay, great. Yeah. But yeah, so I have more experience with Avon River there. We got also, what is it? Wally Burgess was the captain, and he replaced Stella at some point, and he was more of a captain because Stella was kind of an office worker on board a ship, and she was spending all day sleeping, and then she was working all night. She was
Yeah.
a commanding officer for all of the Europe, so she had a lot on her plate, office-wise and admin-wise, and so on. And the ship didn't interest her a whole lot. That was my impression.
You're right. And I remember LRH getting a telex about the state Stella was in. And she was so big, so she had no energy and was in very bad physical shape. So Hubbard actually had her pulled down to Tangiers, where we had a land base, TRC. And she was made the captain there. And actually, I kind of always considered TRC at the time was like the old folks' home. That's where all the elderly were sent. And Jean Tidman, though she wasn't elderly at the time, she was sent there because she'd had a child. And we couldn't have children on the ship. So she went and had her daughter, Jackie Sue, in Tangier and stayed at TRC.
Yeah. No, I mean, Stella had a hard time getting around on this fishing boat with ladders and narrow walkways and all that. So she was kind of, she had her aide that was Sandra Johnson, who was an old timer also. And she was Captain Yeoman, I think her title was. And they were always working together there, long hours until, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then when muster came around, it was somebody else holding the muster and so on. And
let me ask. I want to ask a question because you talk about, Stella was captain, Hannah was captain, Wally Burton was captain, and this is kind of I'm a novice. I have no idea of this. It's just, did you have to have a license or anything to be a captain of a ship at sea? Like we have to have a driver's license to be able to drive a car. Do you know what I mean? Like what was the requirements to become a captain? Just somebody saying you're promoted to captain and off you go?
Well, it depends.
Pretty much, right?
Depends what flag you are under, you see.
It depends what flag you were sailing under. But like I know Norman Starkey, when he was captain, he made sure he got licensed. Bob Young got licensed. I couldn't tell you about Hannah or Stella, or I know John O'Keefe was licensed, I don't know, Pookie, he was probably licensed. These are all people that had ship experience prior, but they might not have been licensed. They might have been just for a little yacht,
And to get licensed,
I never checked into that.
Did you have to do training to get licensed and pass a test, or what happened?
I don't know, but I know Norman registered with Panama, who we sailed under, and
no, it's funny because it just sounds like.
Well, I know how they.
Oh yeah, no, Wally Burgess was the captain, and then this person goes kind of like what Hubbard called a "Hey you" org board. Hey you, you're the captain. Hey you, you're the bosun. Hey you.
Yeah, even Amos Jessup. It's like we went through a lot of captains on the Avon River.
Right, but I know in Denmark here, if you want to have a career as a captain or as a naval officer and so on. It takes years and years, you have to do internship and you have to do school and so on. It's maybe 3 years of schooling and then some practical and all that.
Yeah, not SEAL captains.
No.
They were a dime a dozen.
Could be, yeah.
Do you have any other stories you want to talk about on the? Were you there when the Royal Scotman got out of liability, or had you ended your 6 weeks or so before that?
No, it got out of liability towards the end of my stay there, and I remember I wanted to come back. I had some commitments, and I wanted to come back later that year. But it didn't work out. I actually went back to Spain. I went down to Melilla, the port in northern Morocco there. But the ship had left, and I didn't have that much fun, so I just went home again. So I took it, a nice summer holiday that way.
Were you there when we were in dry dock in Valencia at the end of the Liability Cruise?
No, that must have been just after I left.
Oh, that's yeah, that's it. That's it right there.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, it's quite a
Mary
ship.
Sue standing there? Is that Mary Sue? Is that Mary
No.
Sue standing there?
No. I always thought it was Marion Powell, Marion Dendu.
Okay.
Mm.
But I don't know. Someone gave me that picture thinking I was there, but that's not me.
Wow. Yeah,
Rolf, you remember, what was Mary Sue like as a captain? What was she like dealing with?
Well, she was, she had a good grip on things, and she got things into ship shape, I would say. And she was leaning on Captain Bill Robertson and others to get it all running and so on. But she was certainly a competent commanding officer.
Yeah, this is a picture. Yeah, that's her there in the front of the picture looking over the side with a cigarette in her hand. And then that's Captain Bill. He's talking to the people who are lowering the lifeboat or bringing it up. And then that's Marion Dendu, Marion Powell, who was on the ship in 68, ended up leaving with her parents and then coming back to the Sea Org later when she was like 16 years old. But Marion was Mary Sue's her steward at the time of this, and this was during the Liability Cruise.
Yeah.
Mary Sue was very hands-on as a captain, and definitely depended a lot on Captain Bill.
Yeah. But
now, Janis, they have just blue ocean, and there's no Mary Sue or Captain Bill there, and it's just Marion looking up like this with the ocean behind it. That's how Scientology.
Are you kidding? You're kidding.
I am kidding.
Okay.
I am kidding, but I'm making a point. They've erased Mary Sue from the history of the Sea Org, and Captain Bill, I'm sure too.
Yeah.
The only way they'd have these photos if they took them from my previous videos or my book.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I do have one more story from my experience there. And there was at some point we went ashore, and I thought I had enough because there was so much randomity going on. So I considered blowing. So I went there was a German coaster, a little ship there. And I talked to the captain there, if he would hire me and we could go up to Hamburg, then I would be almost home, you see. And they were very positive, but then we couldn't work out the details. I had to go back to the ship. And then Baron Barres, he was Master at Arms, the ethics officer, right?
Right.
So he got her. He heard about it, and I ended up in handcuffs and all that.
You did?
Yeah. It was
Baron put you in handcuffs?
I don't know. Just one hand.
No, that's not Baron.
Okay.
Baron Barres, yeah. Yeah, we had another picture of him. He was a very...
I'll find... Who he is. Oh, okay.
Right here?
There he is. Yep.
Exactly. He was very dedicated he liked to be the bad guy, the bad cop or the good cop. He was certainly the bad cop, you see.
Yeah, he actually was the one who was the MAA, the Master at Arms, who walked around with a mace. He had the stick and then a little chain and then the ball with the spikes on it. And he'd walk around with this, or else he'd walk around with a baton.
Yeah, you at least have a stick to show for it.
Is he the one, Janis? Is he the one, Janis? Is he the one, Janis, that he got offloaded because he was smoking pot or weed on the ship?
I was just about to say that. I remember Hubbard's looking over the side of the ship, and a boat had come in with people from Liberty, and they're climbing up the ladder. And Hubbard looks down, and there's Barron, and he's like, he looks like he's high. and that's when they found a can of pot
Marijuana
in his cabin, and he got offloaded for drugs.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's some kind of MA.
Exactly.
Yeah. But he was good at playing the part, I tell you that much, with the stick and going around there. And
oh, yeah.
For this and many more stories about the Liability Cruise, you can buy a copy of Janis's book. Is this the right one, Janis, that covers it? This
yes, it's in that book. Yes.
Yeah, Commodore's Messenger, Book 1, Child Adrift in Scientology Sea Organization, written by Janis Gillham Grady, and that's young Janis with L. Ron Hubbard on the Royal Scotman. And you can order an autographed copy of that. It's just go down below. You'll see it. Click on it, and she'll autograph it to you and send it to you. And then there's also, of course, Book 2 of Janis as well. And that copy is also available below. So just click on it. If you want to get an autographed copy, you can. And the book has not just stories, but also lots of photographs too. So, it's very informative and entertaining. So anyway, just wanted to mention that.
right.
We thank everybody for being here. Please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, rock slam that like button, hit the notification button so you know when we have next show up. If you have any questions or comments about what we just talked about, go down below, type away. We answer them all, we check them all, and we appreciate any feedback that you might have. And then also, if you want to support the channel, there's a link in the description where you can buy us a coffee. We appreciate any support that you might want to send our way. And then finally, if you'd like to become a member of our channel, just click on that join button next to the subscribe button. There's a short little video that you can watch, and then we appreciate that support as well. It helps us to continue putting out these videos. Rolf and Janis, do you have anything else you guys want to say before we end off this show?
Rolf, I want to thank you. That was fun. I enjoyed going over that time period.
Well, and thank you, Mark, and of course, Janis, who we kind of share experiences there, which makes it fun to exchange. But thank you very much. Very nice.
Yeah, and Rolf, I'll put a link in the description to you. You have a website or where they can order your book from Amazon. Tell everybody the name of your book.
Yeah, it's called Deep Clearing, and there's a subtitle, but Deep Clearing, that will do it. And it's by Rolf Dane, and if you type in those words, you will get to it on Amazon.
Yeah, I'll put a link. I did last time. I'll put a link to the Amazon page where they can order your book if they're interested, and it tells more about it.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you to keep up the good work. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Good.
Well, thanks a lot, Rolf. Stick around. We'll be right back. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.